Alright, this tutorial is going to show you how to get started on a composite, and that's assuming that you have collected a bunch of images that you plan to use for your composite. And you may not know how they go together quite yet, but that's okay, because as you start working with these images, you might figure out how they will fit together to create an aesthetically pleasing composition. You know, thinking about emphasis, thinking about color, thinking about movement, and all of those elements and principles of art that help make a composition successful. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new document. And you can make it 8 by 10, 10 by 8, or if you want a square, you could make it 8 by 8. I'm going to go with an 8 by 10, and that's just so that it fits on the printable page. The resolution needs to be 300. The background, you can have white or transparent. Remember, transparent has the checkerboard appearance. And what I'm going to do is just open one image at a time. So I've got, I know where they're at. So make sure you know where your files are at that you need to access. And I'm going to start with the background because I want to build my collage from the back forward. So I'm going to start with this watercolor background because that's what I'd like for the background. But I did notice that this orientation doesn't fit my vertical orientation. So I'm going to rotate it. That's under Edit, no, Image. It's got to be in here somewhere. Image rotation, rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise because I want the green at the bottom because the heavier stuff feels like it should be at the bottom, the darker stuff. So I'm going to take my move tool and I'm going to drag it in. I'm going to convert the color source. And notice it's super big, so I'm going to zoom out. And I can see that it's super big. So I'm going to Control T, it's the shortcut for transform. And I'm going to hold the Shift key to scale it down to the size that I need it to be on this document. And then I'm going to hit Enter or this check mark up here. Control plus to zoom in. That looks good. I am going to open the next image. File open, Command O. And the next thing I'm going to bring in is the C branches. And I do want to get rid of the background. So you've tried and used a couple different selection tools, and you'll find that your selection tools are going to work very differently with different images. So I'm going to start with the magic wand. And I'm going to notice when I click and I hold the Shift to add to that selection, I'm noticing it's not picking up all the details that I want. I'm going to Command D to deselect. So I'm going to try selecting just the background instead. And notice it's kind of not picking up on some of these because these pixels are too similar. So I'm going to change the tolerance so it doesn't pick up quite as many maybe. I'm not sure how this will go. But I can always adjust a selection after I've made it. I'm just holding the Shift key and I keep adding to this selection here. And I know that I don't need this selection for my collage. I don't need it to be perfect. I just want it as a texture in the background anyway. So for this particular image, it's not super important to me that every single little detail is perfectly selected. So I'm just going to try to pick up as much as I can here. And then because I'm selecting the background, I want to inverse the selection. Select Inverse. So now just the tree is selected, but it's got some branches and stuff in here that I don't want to be part of the selection. So I'm going to throw it in Quick Mask mode. Okay, and remember in Quick Mask mode, basically it's like a clipping mask. You have to use the paintbrush and white and black paint. Black paint will conceal, and I'm at 59%, so I want that to go up to 100, so it completely gets rid of those selections. I'm also going to make sure that I have a nice sharp edge brush. So I'm going to go up to the brush tool and I'm going to raise the hardness of that brush. And I'm going to get rid of all of that excess stuff down in the corners that I don't need. And then, you know, I could go in and if I made a mistake, like right up here, I could switch it to white and I could fix that. the smaller brush. The left bracket will make your brush smaller. Maybe I need to fix that little spot in there. So I could go in and really refine this selection if I wanted to. I'm going to take it out of quick mask mode by clicking this button here. Command 0 will fit it in the window. And now I have the selection all ready to go. So I'm going to pull this down into its own window. And I am going to drag my selection, grab the Move tool, drag this into my new document, convert the color modes. And notice there's some things that I need to fix in here. I need to get rid of these little pieces of background. So I'm going to just do it while it's in here. Hit delete, select, and I'm using the Magic Wand tool right now. And remember that the Magic Wand tool may not work well with your particular project. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to just delete all of those. And just for time-sensitive purposes, I'm going to pretend that I have made all of the selections that I wanted and I've really perfected this image. Okay. So now I've got that in there, and I'm not going to worry about where it's placed because that will come. I'm going to open the next image, Command O, and I want to bring in this deer. So the first thing I'm going to do is crop out the deer on the left. So grab the crop tool over here on the left, and I'm going to pull in the crops. Get rid of some of that excess background. Hit enter to crop it. And I'm going to do the same thing. It's a nice white background. I think the Magic Wand will do a really good job. The only thing is, it's going to select all the whites inside the deer's head, and I don't want that. I want the deer's head to be white. So I'm going to throw it into quick mask mode. And I'm going to add to that selection. So black reveals, white conceals. Switch to black. I'm going to make that part of the selection here. And you will probably do a much better job than I would at this because you're going to take more time making sure it's just right. So let's say it is just right. You know, and I can go back in with my white paint if I missed something like up here. I want to get rid of that. Take it out of quick mask mode, and there's my selection of my deer. So I'm going to also inverse that selection, pull this down so that I can see both windows, take my Move tool, and drag it in. Remember that you have to have all of your images high resolution, okay? So I could leave him there like that, but I could also make him smaller. Command T, shortcut for transform, could make it smaller, holding the Shift key to scale him down a little bit. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is open this text here. So I wanted to have some writing over the top of it. This is not legible. It's maybe even in another language. But I want to bring this image in and see what I can do with that. Notice that each time I open a file and I pulled it into my document, I'm closing the windows. That's because I don't want too many windows open in Photoshop. It will crash the program and then I risk losing some work. So I'm going to take my Move tool, I'm going to drag it in, and now I've got this in here. And now I have to decide what I'm going to do with it. I might play around. I'm going to click the Hide tool. So I'm going to get these things kind of set the way I want them to be. And so I'm going to take my branches and I'm going to move them up. And I want them to kind of feel like they're coming out of the antlers. Command T. So I'm going to rotate them a little bit. I want them to feel like it's part of what's on his head. Okay. And I want that to be transparent. So I'm going to lower the opacity of that so it's not so vibrant. Okay. And then I'm going to take these words, and what I want to happen is I want the top of these words to disappear, but slowly reappear as they get to the bottom. So there's a couple things I could do, but I'm going to choose, you know, with Photoshop, there's always 10 ways to do one thing. I am going to select that layer, and I'm going to put it into a clipping mask, a layer mask. So right down here at the bottom of the layers palette, there's this button that looks like a little camera. When I click that, a little white layer appears next to my layer that I have selected. Now this works much like the quick mask mode. So when I take my brush and my black paint, I can erase from that layer. When I take and switch it to white paint, I can paint those details back in. So that's the benefit to using a mask versus an eraser, because an eraser just gets rid of it, and with a mask you can always come back and bring it back. So I'm going to change my brush to a soft fuzzy edge brush and make my brush bigger. The right bracket key will make that brush bigger. Now I am going to be in my quick mask mode or layer mask mode with black paint. I'm going to erase from that layer. Notice I'm just erasing at 100%, but as I get down here a little bit further, I want it to erase at 50%. So I'm going to lower the opacity of the brush. So we've got the brush tool, and across the top here are all the settings for that brush. I'm going to make my brush bigger, and I'm going to slowly erase some of it. So you notice it's only erasing at 50%. I'm going to go down a little bit more, maybe down to like 25, and erase some more so I can start to see the image behind it up here. I'm also going to play with the modes of this layer. So I'm going to go up to my layers palette here and drop down here. There's all these different blending modes. I can play around with the blending modes until I find something that I really like. And I kind of like that. I like that the text is showing through over the image. It's a little bit more intense there. I can still see all of the images, and I like how they're blending together. So I'm going to leave it like that, and then I might play around with some of the blending modes for my other images. So maybe I might go to the branches, and I might try linear light, and I like how it added a little contrast. So anyway, I'm going to keep building this composite with all of the images that I have collected. And notice that I have probably 3, 6, 9, 11 images here to work with. I may not use all of them, and that's okay. And I might need more. So let's take a look at the finished product. This is all the layers here. If I take the eye and hide it, I can see which layer it is. So there's the butterfly in its own layer, sitting on top of everything, because that layer is on top. The next one is those kind of sketched flowers. And I liked the quality of the sketched flowers because it kind of matched the black and white deer. And then behind that is the bird. So there's the bird. If I wanted to bring the bird to the front, I could take that layer and drag it all the way to the top. And look, the bird now comes to the front of all of the other layers. But I want to tuck him behind the flowers. So I'm just going to drag him back. And then I've got this layer. I've got all got the deer layer. And then this leaves, colorful leaves here, this one. Notice that it's kind of got some funky coloring, and that's because I have linear light selected for that. If I put it back to normal, you can see what it was when I originally brought it in. So I want to put that on linear light, and maybe I want to even make this deer a little bit more transparent. So I'm going to select the layer under opacity, and I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit until I get it where I want it. Okay, and then that's how the image is built. So you can see right here how the image is built. And then here's the text. Okay, that text right there. Here's the layer mask. I can see where I erased. If I need to go back in and fix something in there, I can. So I have to be in that layer mask. Oops. To be in that layer mask, and I can use my black and white paint to bring some details back if I want. And then when I'm saving it, File, Save As, I have to save it as a PSD if I Photoshop, and that adds the PSD extension. I have to save it as a PSD file to preserve all these layers. So if you're planning to come back to this project tomorrow to work on it, and you want all of those layers to be visible, you must save it as a PSD. When you're completely finished with the composite, you can save it as a JPEG. And you'll turn the JPEG in to Canvas this way. And that's it. So just getting you thinking about how you can work with those layers and how you can make that composite to make all of those images come together.